Let's go straight away to our spotlight then for this evening, because first it was Volkswagen, more recently Mitsubishi, and now it's Daimler that is in the throes of a car emission scam. Daimler has opened an investigation into its own emission testing process at the behest of the U.S. Department of Justice. The owner of Mercedes-Benz was approached last Friday by the Department of Justice with questions about its testing process as far as diesel engines were concerned. Phil Lebeau now joins us with more details. Bring us up to date with what's happening at Daimler, because it's been a wretched week overall for the auto industry, with pretty much every leading car manufacturer feeling some heat.
Right, and today in Europe you had regulators saying that there are a number of automakers whose diesel emissions for specific vehicles, about 630,000 in Europe, do not meet emission standards. So that's the latest issue there. With regard to Daimler and what's happening with the Department of Justice, the automaker has been asked to verify the processes it goes through when it comes to its emissions. Now, we don't know if we're talking specifically about diesel emissions or emissions overall. My sense is it's going to be mainly about the diesel emissions for certain vehicles. Keep in mind that earlier this year here in the United States, there was a lawsuit that was filed on behalf of owners of Mercedes diesel vehicles, and the law firm said, look, we believe that we have evidence showing that these vehicles do not meet emission standards in a variety of conditions. That might have been the trigger point that caused the DOJ to say, wait a second, here's an outside firm that says it believes that these emissions do not meet the standards that have been set here in the United States. Now the DOJ has gone to Daimler and has said, we want you to review your processes. This is slightly different than what we saw with Volkswagen, but it's all under this big umbrella, which is how do you justify and prove that what you say are the emissions and the mileage for particular vehicles are accurate? And that, at the end of the day, is the big question facing not only Daimler, but really all automakers, not only in the U.S., but also in Europe.
Right, Phil. And of course, we really need to wait and watch what happens after that internal inquiry that Daimler is conducting. But it's remarkable, the radical change in fortunes for the company, because just about 3 weeks ago, you had the Daimler CEO speaking about how this has been the best year for Daimler in the company's history. And suddenly, over a period of like a month, because February, I think, is when these group of consumers actually complained. So how radically their fortunes have changed?
Well, I think it's too early to say that their fortunes have changed dramatically. When you look at, let's take, for example, the possibility that there might be some irregularities with their diesel emissions here in the United States. Diesel makes up a very small percentage of the sales overall for Mercedes in the United States. And it is possible that the company could come back and say, look, we found some irregularities, we're going to fix those. That's far different than what we saw and are seeing with Volkswagen, where the company has said, look, we lied. We came out and we put cheat devices in these vehicles. It remains to be seen the impact of this investigation. It could wind up being nothing. It could wind up being far more severe. But at this point, I think it's a little premature to say that Daimler's fortunes have changed. It is certainly being challenged right now. But overall, I think it's too soon to say that this is going to be a horrific year on the scale of what we've seen with Volkswagen.
Absolutely, Phil, and fair enough. We really need to wait and watch, as I said, to really find out what comes out of that internal inquiry. But tell us a little bit, in terms of, we've already seen as far as the technology companies are concerned. Many of the American technology companies have attracted the ire, of the EU Commission, which many of the, whether it's the Amazon, whether it's the Google, whether it's the Facebook, different kinds of cases are being pursued against American technology companies in EU, and that has clearly rattled the Americans. Now many Europeans are now alleging that are European car makers being identified, and is there perhaps sort of a political underpinnings to this? Do you think this could also create some tensions between the EU and the US?
Well, first of all, I don't buy that regulators in the United States are targeting European automakers as some kind of retaliation for the greater scrutiny that tech companies in the U.S. are facing in Europe. I don't think that's happening at all. I think what's happening is that Volkswagen, which was really the tip of the iceberg, if you want to even call it that, it might be the entire story, but Volkswagen, because it has such a huge presence when it comes to diesel engine vehicles in the United States, has been the primary focus. Now, if you're the DOJ in the United States and you look at this and say, are all diesel engines going through something similar to this? Who do you look to? Who are the companies that are building and selling diesel engines primarily in the United States? The European automakers. That's where the focus of the investigation appears to be. And oh, by the way, we should also point out that BMW and Daimler have gone on the record repeatedly in saying, look, we don't have cheat devices in our vehicles. And there hasn't been any proof offered up by a regulatory agency, either in Europe or in the United States, that shows that there is a cheat device in a Daimler vehicle or a BMW vehicle. But in terms of the focus of these questions, it's focused primarily on diesel engine vehicles. They are primarily built by European automakers. So I don't think this is retaliation against the EU having greater scrutiny against Google, Microsoft, whoever it might be over there.
Okay, Phil. Also, I think that diesel currently accounts for a very small percentage of the overall US car market. But following the Volkswagen scandal, just tell us a little bit about the perception of diesel as a technology among the average consumers there.
It's never been good. It's never been good since diesel was first pushed in the U.S. in the mid-'70s. Back then, it was offered up as an alternative. Most people who either bought a diesel engine vehicle back in the 70s and early 80s or were exposed to it, they found them to be smelly, clunkers. They didn't really run very efficiently. I mean, it was not a smooth ride. It's taken years for that image to be erased. And it really started to change a little bit, not dramatically, but a little bit after 2000, maybe in the 2005 range. And Volkswagen was aggressively pushing the idea that, look, it's a new age for diesel vehicles in the U.S. Come over here, you're going to get greater fuel efficiency, you're going to be burning cleaner, it'll help the environment. And that's the message that a lot of people bought into when they bought a diesel engine vehicle in the U.S. Now, because of this scandal involving Volkswagen, a lot of Americans look at diesel vehicles and they say, well, first of all, I wasn't really sure I should buy one. And now, why would I buy one if I know the emissions were rigged on these Volkswagen models? So I don't see diesel ever growing to be a big part of the market.
Has it impacted sales of other European cars? Has it impacted sales of other European car makers in the U.S.?
No. No, in fact, if you take a look at Mercedes, if you take a look at BMW in the U.S., look at Audi sales for that matter. They were all at record highs last year. The primary impact of the Volkswagen scandal has been on the Volkswagen brand. And within that brand, it's primarily on the diesel models. Now, it's also been tougher for them to sell other gasoline-fueled models, but the primary impact from this entire scandal has been on Volkswagen.
Thank you very much, Phil, and thanks so much for joining us, bringing us up to date with that big story. We will be touch basing with you in the days ahead. Thanks.